Thanks for joining us for this week's edition of People Over Politics. As promised, we have a double header with two new guests. And, thanks so much for joining us today, Quida. Uh,
Thank you for having me, Martin.
yeah, I hope you don't mind that I, called you Quida instead of, your full name, Laquita. We're family, right? We're Black USA News family, Be More News family.
Absolutely. Everybody calls me Quida. That's cool.
Okay, gotcha. And so, Quita, for people, who don't know you, who aren't familiar with you, of course, I'm from the Prince George's area. You're from Baltimore City. Tell people about who you are and, a little bit about what you do.
Okay. All right. So, in a nutshell, I do whatever the community needs. I am a housing advocate. I am the founder and director of Smalltimore Homes, and we build micro shelters and tiny homes for folks who are experiencing housing insecurity. You see behind me my very first design, which was a 20-foot tiny home. I should say is a 20-foot tiny home on wheels. I also host a weekly wellness walk with a group of 5 other women here in Baltimore. I'm on a couple different boards, a sustainability team, a redevelopment team here in Baltimore. I just, like I said, I do what it takes. But at the end of the day, most of my work is rooted in like restorative justice, whether it's housing, whether it's job security, skill set, digital equity. I'm always thinking about like how to bridge that marginalized gap.
Okay, so just basically all around. And I know Baltimore is very, east west specific. Are you east or you west Baltimore? And then,
So this is the thing. I have to be honest. So I was born in New York, but I was raised in Baltimore. So when people ask me where I'm from, I say Baltimore. But here's another caveat. I was raised in Baltimore County. To Baltimore City, that is a whole nother world. But now I'm officially an East Side girl. I live in East
are
Baltimore
you?
near Johns Hopkins Hospital. But West Baltimore is like where I really want to do most of the work because West Baltimore doesn't get as much love as it should.
Sure. And there's a lot that we can hit on. And one thing I'll start with is what you specialize in, which is, helping the community, as you said, restorative justice, especially the need for housing. I'm sure that you've probably been paying attention to some degree what's been going on in Laurel and, the fight for, a rent stabilization policy.
Yeah,
Are you familiar with it?
I am. I am. As a matter of fact, like moments before you had mentioned it to me, I had heard about it. But only because of you, Martin, do I feel like I like dug in some more because I don't know that we've ever considered like rent control here in Baltimore. And
Yeah,
like the research of New York, like most people right now are like experiencing severe rent rates, right? But
sure.
New York is stabilized because of, from what it seems historically, because they have had their rent rolls, being stabilized. So I thought that was brilliant. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know that this was something we could still do today.
Well, I agree. And this is something that's a renewed interest and a renewed passion. And I think I said at a rally before the city council meeting this past Monday was I read a New York Times article that said the rent revolution is coming. But, the rent revolution has been here a long time in Laurel. We've been negotiating with landlords, since early this year,
Right.
trying to help. There's been some 30, 40, 50, 60% in which we've been able to negotiate into single or double, low double digits.
Right.
But of course, we got to do something long term. And one of the things that I wanted to, just make sure to highlight was New York does have, the rent control policy in a lot of their properties and a lot of their jurisdictions. But, what we're asking for is, a bit different. It's called rent stabilization.
Hmm.
So rent control is like capped to a certain dollar amount, where rent stabilization is generally more like a percentage.
So it's
What
equitable.
percentage increase? Yeah, what percentage of increase you can have annually or biannually. a trial or things of that nature. So, it's not like you can only charge $1,700 and at this fixed rent. It's not like that, but it's saying, annually, I think for our policy, what we ask for is 3%. And so it's to say that you can only increase your lease 3% each year. And if you need to increase it more, there's a process, to go through that. And especially you would have to, prove why, that you need this extreme increase. But I think that, it should definitely be capped at like 10%, because I don't think that, residents should be facing, $100 increases from year to year, especially given that, things are rough. And I think one of the landlords said is increases should keep up with inflation. And I responded like, well, increases have not kept up with inflation.
It needs to be higher.
I've seen increases of 30, 40, 50% where inflation was only, 8, 9, 10. So, please explain that.
Right.
So.
Right. No, I totally agree. And then one of the things that you mentioned, the fact that even though New York did have its rent control policy, it still is outpricing a lot of people. Like there are, like, let's not get it twisted. Like New York is still extremely expensive, but they were able to leverage that. And so it balances out the statistics. But there are still people that are living, foot to mouth in New York. And to your point, like here in Baltimore, I don't know. I feel like rent increases can only be up to 20%. I feel like there is some sort of legal situation, but I don't know that there's any real repercussion or what happens if it's above 20%? What does the renter do? They don't just stop paying their rent. Like Baltimore is known not to be tenant favorable. So I don't even see that being.
Maryland isn't.
Do you see what I'm saying? And right. So Maryland, right? Because I know that Baltimore is, in a lot of ways, it has really different rules than Maryland, but in a lot of ways, the whole state is racist.
Y'all have more just cause, I believe. I believe you have more just cause rules, and just cause is important when you're talking about any rent policies, especially rent control or rent stabilization, because if you implement a policy like this, you would then have, if you didn't have a just cause, you would then have people just evicting tenants so they can displace them and get people who could pay more money.
Right.
And the thought is, it's like, you don't want to displace people. So I know Baltimore has more just cause. They have to give a reasoning why they're evicting this tenant, or they're not going to renew their lease. And then the other thing is vacancy decontrol. So vacancy decontrol basically, means that after that person leaves, whether they leave on their own fruition, they don't choose to sign the lease again, or they're evicted, they can't just then raise that for rent for the next person who comes in 30%. So that's what vacancy decontrol is. So it's yes. So you need one or both of those things in place for sure.
Right. Because to that thing, I'm like, I know that sometimes rent will go up in certain units because those units have been refurbished, restored, renovated, whatever the case may be. Yeah. But it eventually, it's going to price everybody out who was in that building before, if that's, what they continue to do. So all of these things that, I love what you said about it being a percentage, because then it's more equitable. If I don't get a raise, then I'm almost not penalized for not getting a raise. I can't control if my business or my employer can give me a raise, or if they value me at the value that I see myself. So these are things that are really complicated in Baltimore because we lack jobs that pay a substantial amount of money. We have a lot of people that go out to your Silver Spring, your PG County, your DC to get their jobs, but everyone doesn't have that luxury, especially if you didn't graduate high school. Let's start there. Not going to get on my soapbox, but yeah.
I think jobs and opportunity, I remember saying this years ago, that, the gateway to crime is poverty, right? And
Absolutely.
people's like lack of access to resources, and lack of access to hope, like, right? Some people feel like there's not
Absolutely.
hope, right? And so, like, I like that what you've done is you've found a situation, and you've tried to figure out a solution that was positive for the community. And it's from an advocate community perspective, right? So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was because I thought that was very creative of using small homes and tiny homes, because I remember before running on the campaign trail, really researching creative alternative housing, right? So, like,
Right.
transit oriented smart growth, but also looking at tiny home communities and how they could be helpful for the unhoused, but also for the senior community, or for maybe more transitional,
Right.
many different things. And I remember seeing the new development in Atlanta, and I was super excited because I think it was by Black folks. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yep.
But it's sold out before it even finished developing.
Yep.
But I think that those are things that we could bring here. We just have to change some of the zoning laws around tiny homes, and we have to be imaginative. So
Absolutely.
what have you seen, I guess, in your time
Yeah.
with Smalltimore homes, and how do you what is your plan to expand this? Because I would love to see, like, up and coming pilot programs, and in certain areas, like, we have the benefit, and we definitely can do this
Absolutely.
if we desire to.
Absolutely. So here's the thing. Like, here's the big secret. As long as the community allows it, no one is going to complain that I came to their neighborhood and replaced a couple of tents with some micro shelters, right? So, to your point, it can be done and it is being done. Like, those things can't be, put out into the open, because we don't want people going around and whispering or saying anything. But as long as folks need this in their community, like, reach out to Smalltimore Homes, because it can get done as long as the community agrees to it, because then it's not a nuisance. It's a community organization. It's something that the community has created. Therefore, it's sustainable. So it's not just that, I'm coming into a neighborhood and I'm replacing tents. No, we all are replacing tents. This is something that I have to do with volunteers. This is a nonprofit. We are not a development company. So it is very community oriented. We make sure that the community folks understand that, hey, if it is freezing cold and it's a blizzard and folks can't get to a shelter, is there someone that is willing to let them sleep in the hallway or in their home, for that matter? You know what I mean? But
Sure.
we can't impose on people things and folks that they don't know personally, but we do have to continue to think in the mindset of a community. So not only would there be tents there, but we would do urban gardening. We would make sure that there's some sort of digital access, some sort of wraparound services. Like, the point is, you cannot get a job if you don't have an ID, and you can't get an ID if you don't have an address. Like, these things are very simple barriers that I think most folks don't take into consideration. So what I've seen is that communities do want this, but it's finding the right, I guess it's finding the right partners that are going to ensure that the wraparound services are being enforced, and that folks aren't just left behind because they didn't get here overnight and just throwing somebody in a house and being like, all right, figure it out. They would have figured it out if they could have figured it out in a tent. But this is just a more sustainable, healthier, it's more like a home. And so if I don't have to think about all day long where I'm asleep tonight, if I'm asleep safely, and if my things, my worldly belongings, because I'm housing insecure, so all of my belongings are with me. Like, these shelters solve so many issues that, like I said, I think that we are taken for granted. That when I'm able to work with volunteers and I'm able to lay these stones in front of people and they can see it just as clearly as I do, that this work is just necessary. regardless of if policy changes or not, it's necessary. But
Mm-hmm.
I would love for policy to change, because then instead of me working with volunteers and building for folks who are unhoused, I can confidently get funding for teenage mothers, LGBT and queer youth, folks who age out of foster care, all these different marginalized populations that have such a huge presence here in Baltimore. They would benefit from village living, like just being in a cohort of other council members or other folks that advocate for cannabis. You know that they are speaking your language, and it's not a stressor. It's like community. It would be the same way for these folks in their villages, right? Like they can speak to folks about how to secure a job, who tolerates the fact that they are unhoused. Because let's face it, folks will go to get a job, they'll have a shower, have on new clothes, and folks will see that they are staying in a shelter and say, oh no, we don't have any work, or you're not the guy for the job, just for that reason. So there's even still like some sort of, issue with the idea that this person is unhoused, even if they went through a divorce, they are underwater because they lost their job, it's medical bills. There's so many reasons that people can be unhoused that have nothing to do with drugs or mental health, that's where everybody starts. And it's like, no, that's not the only reason. Like there's so many systemic reasons that need to be addressed.
Well, you brought up a bunch of great things. I think one thing that, or really two things, I highlight that you brought up the fact of community living, which is important, and what that tiny home community brings.
Right.
And something else big that you brought up was you know really just about the community response and what the community response should be, right? Like I remember, thinking like, how do I sell something like this to the community? And my thought was like, it is our duty as a community to protect the most vulnerable and those on the margins, like you said. And it comes at a lower cost, doing it proactively than reactively, because of course
Absolutely.
we need a lot more supportive services and a
Right.
lot more tax burden to the system. And
Right.
so that is awesome. And I'm so delighted that you're helping, of course, so many different people in the community. And one of the things that I thought about was how it's it's incredibly difficult to be poor.
Oh my
and
God.
and so the reason I say that is because you know, people don't understand, like,
That's an
sometimes
understatement.
sometimes just being poor is a full-time job, right? Like, figuring out like how you're gonna, put food on the table, figuring out how you're gonna make it to work. And I remember it was one of the TV skits, I think the Daily Show or something, but it was a story of a woman, and she got evicted maybe once or twice, and she was calling around looking for other places to get into. And
Hmm.
I think that it kind of boiled down to, she's like, "Where are you living now?" And
Right.
she was like, "My car." And she was just like, "Oh, we can't help you."
Nope.
So it was like,
The stigma is already there.
yeah, maybe she could have the ability to pay, maybe she doesn't, but it was really just like, as soon as she heard that she was unhoused, they were just like, "Oh no,
No,
we can't deal with you." So I
no.
was, whew, that's difficult, and we all know that Section 8 housing is, the line is crazy. You could be on there till you die. Uh,
Right.
and
Years long.
on there till you die. And then if we're going on, any type of other housing vouchers, those things are, the need is great. So, the demand cannot
Even
keep up.
those have
The
year
demand
long waiting lists.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then you have shelters, in which, like, shelters a lot of times aren't the best places, and they don't have the capacity nor the resources to help people. And a lot of times I mentioned that you know criminality has been exacerbated by the lack of care that has been given towards people's mental health. Because
Absolutely.
one of the things is, you look at is like, a lot of people in jail, a lot of people in prison, a lot of people who are suffering from the effects of those places, are also suffering from mental ailments, that went undiagnosed and untreated for so long. And, many times we think about, just why it's turned out to be this way. It's because we no longer put an emphasis, it started with Reagan, when we overcriminalized and started like under specializing, I would say. I don't,
Right.
I have no clue how to put it, but yeah.
Right. No. Like, to that point, we can't even negate the fact that, okay, so it's all those things, but even still, it's environmental, because there's lead in everything in Baltimore. It's in the water, it's in the soil, it's in the air. There's so many filtration plants in Baltimore City. That's horrible for the environment. That's horrible for the people. So lead should not be in your body. And when lead is in your body, you don't have the same reactive restraint that someone who doesn't have lead in their body. So people are responding to someone stepping on their foot with a punch in the face instead of a dag, you stepped on my foot, because they are already hyped up because of how quickly and short their attention span is, how high their anxiety is, the lack of self-worth because there's blighted buildings everywhere, the fact that lead shouldn't be in your body. Like, all of these things are things that these children are dealing with every day. And then we expect them to grow up and be responsible adults. But how does that happen? Like, where would that transition even occur? It won't. And so then we just have this society of perpetual anger, lacking, all of these things, because specifically in Baltimore, like, Baltimore is called the Black Butterfly because these areas are Black areas, but all this orange, we call that the white L. So this is the white L here.
You gotta explain this for non like
All
where
right.
is, yeah, give me a little,
So
because this,
if you can see it, this is literally like the whole map of Baltimore, right?
okay.
And here is where the harbor is. And this is
Very, very rich part, definitely very rich part.
right.
And
So all of
um,
this is the very rich part where all the money goes. The other parts, this here,
where's like that's like Hamden and Canton in there somewhere in that orange.
all up in here.
Oh, okay, yeah, got you.
And then down here is the water, like the harbor, Canton, um, Harbor East, all those parts. But West and East Baltimore on the opposite sides. And it basically makes a butterfly. So this is a complete, like, red lined
Hmm.
map that still exists today, still shows that redline communities are being harmed. But the point is, this is by Dr. Lawrence Brown, Black man who went to Morehouse College. I'm going to spell me brag. And he mentions my work in this book, but more importantly, it's like how
Oh,
to
okay.
solve the problems in Baltimore, because lead is a huge issue. Like, you can't think properly, you can't function properly, and you don't have the same restraints. And mental health can help, but it's in your system. Like, this is a chemical
Look,
imbalance.
everyone should have access to, clean water, because a lot of that lead comes from the water, the piping, that hasn't been changed. So yeah, I
Right.
mean, it definitely a good amount comes from the water, and I think we've seen that recently when you guys had the water exposure.
In
you
West
know
Baltimore.
yeah, I mean, and from what I was being told, not being from Baltimore, it was definitely the poorer areas, that were impacted, the
Yes.
hardest for sure. So
Yes. And so all of those things combined is like, well, once you start figuring it out, it's like James Baldwin said, it's like to be a conscious Negro, like you're constantly in anger. Like, why is this like this? If you knew that redlining these neighborhoods were going to cause, schools to be divested, roads to be in shambles, homes to be, uninvested or not kept up, just all these things that happen, on top of Baltimore used to be known for Bethlehem Steel. When that company left, a lot of the population left. And so then we had white flight. So at one point, Baltimore housed over 1 million people, 1.2 million people, right?
facts.
Now, less than 700,000. So all those homes still exist. They're still standing, but they're falling apart. So it's like all of these combined issues makes Baltimore's homeless issue and housing insecurity different than a San Francisco, different than a Seattle, different than New York, different than all these places, because one, we have to get rid of the lead. Like, the lead needs to be removed, and,
Yeah.
and communities need to be invested in. Like, if we continue to let the schools have these awful pipes that have lead in them, and these the air conditioning doesn't work, the heating doesn't work, like, the kids aren't going to learn, they're going to drop out. What do you expect? Like, this is just the perfect melting pot for folks not to survive, and us to constant be in survival mode and never being able to thrive, because we're just, oh my God, running, hustling. So the Black Butterfly, to bring it all back, lists 8 to 15 different ways that people can get involved, different trust funds to apply to, different ways to rehab and basically revitalize Baltimore, because it's necessary.
All right. I'm gonna definitely pick up that book. I definitely love a good book, and I see it's a hard copy, so I'm gonna check it out. And
Yeah.
so, I understand that lead is going to continue to be a problem. I understand that there's a huge, unhoused community. With this Smalltimore homes, have you ever thought about how you put people to work with this, with further than the program, or
Yeah.
how some of these most impacted people might help you and gain trades along the way? Has that ever been a thought?
Yeah, so absolutely. So with the capacity of Smalltimore, like, we're at our capacity. However, partnering with other organizations who are already doing workforce development, like Baltimore City's Family House of Children's Services, the Mayor's Office of Employment, working with other organizations and talking to community members like Civic Works. They build tiny homes, but they are but they're not for people who are unhoused. That's what I'll say. So there's a way that I could potentially partner with them so that folks can actually learn the skills with Civic Works and then work with Smalltimore as we continue to work with community, because community needs to come and support somehow so that it is sustainable. But
Sure.
right now, to answer your question, we're at capacity, but we're always willing to make those connections, because when people come and volunteer with us, we absolutely do a tools tutorial. Folks are learning on the job right then and there. We're not cutting off fingers, haven't had any bad, experiences. And we've been doing this since 2018. So, I mean, there is absolutely a potential for a workforce development situation, for so that people can learn the skills, build their own homes, and then live in the community. Like, there's no need to go anywhere. Everything is right here.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I remember I was in college and I came up with some business plan, and it was basically pick a Baltimore neighborhood, purchase a bunch of row homes, and work with some of the unhoused community to fix this, but
Yep.
work with like apprenticeship programs to teach them
Yep.
certain skills while fixing the house, and then they could live there, if not rent free, at a very low
Right.
cost. Continue helping them work on other homes.
A very modest rate.
You
That way
know,
they maintain home, they get some workforce skills, they get some people skills, all of it. And then you can be a resource for them when they're done building and they actually want to go out into the workforce. So there's a organization called Black Women Build here in Baltimore, and that is their complete like plan. They get women to come, they teach them financial literacy, they teach them how to build the homes, they move into the house, and they're doing some great work in West Baltimore where the work is needed.
huh? Awesome. Well, I'm definitely going to check out Black Woman Build, and I know that there's probably other tiny homes in Maryland. Are there any tiny home communities in Maryland? I know this is something that I definitely want to explore as an alternative housing solution.
Yeah. Maryland, so they're not so there are two communities that are being talked about being built here in Baltimore. One, oh, the name escapes me now, but it'll come to me. They are going to be in East Baltimore. And they were expected to break ground in July, but it looks like they just broke ground in October. So that project is like a 2-year project. It's not far from North Avenue and like the cemetery that's over there. When I get more information, I'll relay that to you if you want some updates. And then another one in Lauraville. Both of those organizations are operated by folks who are non-Black, but still cool, not for the still not for my folks as far as working with people who are unhoused, but they are, from what I understand, trying to make these affordable. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
But that's right here in Baltimore. But throughout Maryland, there are 2 hotels that have like tiny structures. One is called like Blue Moon Caverns, something like
I
that.
think I've seen the Blue Moon one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've seen that one.
there's that one, and then there's another one. Oh, there's another one in Maryland too. I'll let me Google. I'll find it for you and I'll let you know. But yeah, so they're up and down. They're up and down all of the East Coast. I've been to a couple in Savannah or a couple in Georgia. One was in Savannah. One was right outside of Atlanta. But tiny home communities, they're so dope because the infrastructure is so much smaller than these 3-story houses that we're used to, these huge ranchers.
Yeah.
Folks don't want all of that space. And if they don't want it, we shouldn't force it. So that's one of the issues I have with policy in Baltimore is that we're forced to build at 400 square feet, which is the size of like a 40-foot container. And that's cool. But to some folks, that's like way too big. And they're like, I could not live in something like that. I would rather it be a storage unit. And we're like, storage units, you can't live in that. But let's talk about making this, 8 by 8, 10 by 10, something like that. So that you're
build out, maybe so,
right.
Yeah.
All these things need to be considered because to be honest, where I store a few of the shelters, folks are already living there. So folks are already living in storage shelters, storage rooms, their cars, abandoned homes. And that's my point. Like if they're living in the abandoned home and the wintertime comes and something catches on fire, that's problematic. And now all the other homes are in danger. Like, why not just make a place where folks can be safe and not have to do things that can endanger the community?
Of course. And the last question before the lightning round is like, how do we get to something that isn't just supportive, but like functional and, is something that could be, long term instead of more temporary transitional? Like how do we get there? Is it really talking to the community, like you said, but also I would think also the legislators would need
some
so convincing and
you're right, but it's twofold. It's all of the above because you can't have one without the other. Like I hate for a developer to just show up in Baltimore, drop some stuff down and be like, well, the people in the community didn't want it. Did you ask the community what they wanted, or if they knew you, or if you were going to give their kids jobs, or if you already had people coming in here? Like think about the community before you start developing stuff. So since that's where my mindset is, I absolutely want to start with community, but I also know that there's a couple of council members who have been working on this since 2018, trying to get accessory dwelling units written into policy and granny flats written into policy. And quite frankly, Martin, I just don't have it in me to sit there and argue with folks about what I know is right. Like everybody deserves housing. So I'm going to let them fight that fight. And what I can work on while policy is being changed in the background is a planned urban development. If I can identify a specific piece of land to build a village on, then that is where, the city is going to approve it. And that is where we can start to build a village. So community members point to a piece of land. We go to the city. They approve a planned urban development. We submit the tiny home plans and move forward from there. But that's how we do it, while policy is still doing what policy does, because that is a part of it.
Okay. And I think that's something to continue exploring because, I think that for me, I would love to be able to see like a senior tiny home community, like, maybe that be like a pilot program, because I know
Yes,
a lot of times seniors, these are empty nesters, these are people who are downsizing, these are people who are moving into senior communities, and it's still very much community vibes, but
exactly.
you know,
Exactly, but it's independent. And so bring me back on one day and we can talk about that, because the beautiful thing about the seniors is that we can bake in so many different like healthcare aspects that are checking air quality and making sure that they're sleeping and breathing properly, so that they're even healthier than they were in the homes before, but they're paying less and they're living more comfortably and they're living off the garden in the neighborhood. So bring me back. We'll talk about it. Like, I have so many ideas.
sure, sure. I mean, my heart is in this anti-homelessness and displacement act and
Right.
law for rent stabilization. But right after that, we hope to get that done early in the year,
For sure.
or I'm sorry, late this year, at the very earliest, first thing next year. So that's definitely something that we're working towards.
Oh, wow. That's dope. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, 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 for sure. I mean, and so, one of the things that I was going to ask you was, of course, I know you're an educated voter. I know
Yes.
that you're engaged, and so it's early voting time,
Yes.
and I know that you're going to go to the ballot. Are
I am.
you going to vote yes on question 4?
I am.
Yeah, that was the last place I saw you, was
Absolutely.
at
Yes.
the for press conference at the was it Impact Hub.
Impact Hub right there on North Avenue in Baltimore. A lot of great things go on there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Impact Hub. I love that idea. I love food halls. All those things are community oriented, and
Yes.
we need to see more of those. So
Yeah.
absolutely. The next question I was going to ask you was, are you a Pepsi or Coke type of person?
Neither. I do not drink those dark sodas. Nope.
Fair. That's fair. I mean, hey, I'm a ginger ale type of person, so I feel you there.
That's
Definitely.
me. If I had to pick one, like I used to only drink ginger ale. I don't even drink ginger ale anymore. Like I make ginger water and leave it at that.
Mm, okay. Hey, you can never beat some real authentic ginger.
Yeah, yes.
Well,
Get you right.
absolutely. And so, who is your favorite superhero and why?
So who is my favorite superhero and why? Foxy Brown, because it's a black woman.
Okay. Okay. Hey, I didn't hear that. I didn't see that coming, and it's never been said before. But at the end of the day, I'm rooting for anything black. So I'm definitely here for that.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. And so the last thing was, you've been awesome. You're doing great things in the community. We want to see you continue to do great things. Hope to work with you, in the future. I know we're part of the Black USA News Network, so we'll definitely continue to be family. Black Media Matters. But how do people stay in contact with you? How can they get in touch with you after this?
Yes, so Smalltimore Homes, SMALLTIMORE. And we're Smalltimore Homes on all the things, the LinkedIn, the Facebook, the MySpace, the whatever.
Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, I know that you have your own show. Definitely would love to come check out. And honestly, I want to be able to check out one of these homes firsthand. So I got to definitely be able to check out one firsthand. And um, what was the other thing I was going to say? Was I hope to have you back. I hope to have
Yeah,
you back. Definitely on People Over Politics. So I almost forgot that last part, but definitely invite me. I want to check out your stuff and
yes.
hope to
We're
have you
on Mondays at 7, and we will have you on, Martin. Don't worry. I got you. The Cannabis
back.
Councilman will be on our show.
Sure, and just always a man of the people, a people's champion. You know, long before I was, the cannabis councilman, I was serving the public. You know,
Exactly.
yes,
Yeah, listen, just real quick, before I founded Smalltimore Homes, I called myself a professional volunteer. Like, even though I was working professionally, I had volunteered so much. It was like 40 hours a week. It was like, I'm a professional volunteer and I work in corporate America. Like, the
Mhm.
community needs what the community needs. So I thank you for your work as well. And thank you for letting me share on your platform.
For sure, for sure. And I know I'll see you soon. Good luck out there in the work you're doing, and I'm sure we'll catch up at the 25th anniversary of Black USA News, or Be More News.
Yeah,
It's Be More News on that one. So 2025 year anniversary of Be More News, and we'll be in style over there at BWI. And so I'm definitely looking forward to putting on my nice fit and,
super excited.
yeah, coming over there styling. But yeah, a lot of you guys I haven't met in person, just really been on Zoom during COVID. So looking forward to connecting with other, people who put on shows on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Same here. I haven't met many of us in person either. So it'll be a great time. I appreciate it.
Yes, yes, I appreciate you, and thanks so much, Quida and Smalltimore Homes. Continue doing what you're doing and serving the community. Thank
I
you.
sure will. Have a good one. Thanks again.
Okay, see you soon. That was Quita. Of course, we always love new guests, especially coming from different areas. She's coming from Baltimore. As we know, Baltimore is a place that it has a lot of culture. Will continue to have a lot of culture, and like many other places, just needs some love and creativity, right? So I appreciate her for doing the work and bringing creative solutions to Baltimore. And I look to use some of this inspiration in Laurel, right? Like we need alternative housing. We know that we need more affordable housing, and I think that exploring other ways, rather than the conventional way, the single family or the townhome, exploring really alternative creative ways, could be a step forward for us, and could help a lot of people. So that meant a lot to me, to have someone doing the work there without all of the support of the local government, but just there for the people. Thank you. Appreciate it. See you next time on People Over Politics. Hey, don't forget, early voting started this week. So, no matter who you're voting for, get out there and voice your opinion, because your vote matters. And without voting, you don't have a voice. And cannabis is on the ballot, one of my favorite subjects. So get out there and go exercise your right. Have a good one.